Singapore currently stands as the wealthiest nation in Asia and is firmly established as one of the most prosperous economies on the entire planet. When we examine the structural data, the scale of this achievement is truly staggering. Despite being smaller in land area than New York City, Singapore's GDP per capita has already surpassed that of traditional Western powerhouses, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. This tiny island nation has effectively transformed itself into a massive economic black hole, strategically designed to attract capital from every corner of the globe. To grasp the true magnitude of this wealth, one only needs to look at the 4,200 multinational corporations that have chosen this small patch of land for their regional headquarters. This concentration of business has led to an immense volume of capital flowing through the city, with total assets under management now reaching an incredible $3.6 trillion. When night falls, the iconic skyline of Marina Bay sands glows over the water, serving as a constant visual testament to this unprecedented economic success. And the high-pitched roar of F1 engines during the famous night race echoes through streets lined with some of the most expensive real estate in the world, proving that extreme wealth here is a lived reality. However, this prosperity becomes even more remarkable when we consider the nation's fundamental vulnerabilities. Singapore possesses absolutely no natural resources of its own, to the point where it has historically struggled even to provide enough fresh water for its own citizens. So, the fact that a nation with such severe geographic and resource disadvantages managed to climb to the very top of the global economic ladder is a phenomenon that demands explanation. Then, the question is clear. How exactly did they turn these fatal weaknesses into a world-class advantage? To find the answer, we must travel back 60 years to a desperate past, to a moment when Singapore was a discarded island with absolutely nothing. That desperate past traces back to August 1965, a moment etched in history when Singapore was thrust into a world it was not prepared for. In a deeply emotional televised address, the first Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, wept as he announced that Singapore had been separated from the Malaysian Federation, because this was not a celebratory independence, but a forced expulsion that left the tiny island suddenly alone and utterly vulnerable. At that moment, the new nation faced a reality that could only be described as catastrophic. Singapore had no military to defend its borders, no natural resources to trade, and remarkably, not even enough land to provide its own drinking water. Also, the economic situation was equally bleak, as the unemployment rate soared past 10%, with no clear industries to absorb the growing workforce. While it had served as a colonial trading port under British rule, that function alone was nowhere near enough to sustain a modern, independent state. Ultimately, Lee Kuan Yew and the founding leaders were haunted by a single, terrifying question, which was how to ensure the sheer survival of their people. And finally, they realized that traditional methods of nation-building would simply not work for a country that lacked even the most basic necessities. For them, the only path forward was to take the few things they did have and refine them into something of extraordinary value for global investors. Therefore, the only way for this tiny island with no resources or land to escape starvation was to transform its geographic location into the most attractive product in the world. That ambitious goal of transforming a geographic location into a world-class product began with a desperate need for jobs. Initially, the government focused on labor-intensive manufacturing to wipe out the high unemployment that threatened the nation's very existence. But the leadership knew this was only a stepping stone, so they strategically shifted toward high-value, high-tech industries to future-proof the economy. To support this industrial leap, Singapore began to maximize its only real asset, which was its strategic position along the Strait of Malacca. They invested heavily to build one of the world's largest and most efficient port systems, while simultaneously developing a world-class airport that would connect them to the entire globe. Beyond physical infrastructure, the government realized that attracting foreign capital required a level of trust that was rare in the region. By championing a strictly clean and corruption-free government, they provided a safe haven where global investors could park their money without fear. And in the 1980s, this evolution took another massive step forward as Singapore set its sights on becoming the financial heart of Asia. At that time, Taking inspiration from the liberalization seen in the US and the UK, they lightened financial regulations and maintained highly competitive low-tax policies. Through these decades of meticulous design, Singapore laid the groundwork to become the Wall Street of Asia, a place defined by stability and efficiency. Ultimately, this relentless planning began to pull massive flows of global capital into the tiny dot of Singapore, leading to results that no one could have imagined. Today, that vision has materialized into a reality where Singapore serves as the definitive destination for global wealth. The city has successfully positioned itself as the primary hub for the world's most powerful corporations, largely due to its incredibly strategic corporate tax rate of 17% or lower. Because of these aggressive incentives, tech giants like Meta and Google have chosen this island as their regional home, solidifying its status as the undisputed tech capital of Asia. Beyond corporate interest, Singapore has also become the ultimate sanctuary for private wealth, especially for the surging number of billionaires from China and India. This shift has led to an explosive growth in family offices, which are specialized private firms created to manage the immense fortunes of the ultra-wealthy. As a consequence, the total assets under management in this small city have now surpassed a staggering $3.6 trillion, a figure that continues to climb every year. However, the government did not stop at financial numbers, as they understood that true power comes from being a place where the wealthy actually want to live and invest their lives. By investing in iconic landmarks like the Marina Bay Sands, luxury integrated resorts, and the high-octane excitement of F1 night races, Singapore transformed its entire brand into a symbol of prestige. So, it is no longer just a cold and functional financial center, but a vibrant, world-class playground that defines the modern identity of extreme luxury and success. Yet, beneath the golden glow of these magnificent skyscrapers, another reality is beginning to emerge as the hidden price of this dazzling economic success. For decades, Singapore has maintained a social contract that prioritized rapid growth and stability above almost everything else. Consequently, this unique model of success has long been shadowed by criticisms of its authoritarian governance, where the freedoms of the press and public assembly are strictly managed. While the city-state offers immense wealth, many argue that this prosperity has come at the cost of individual liberties and a shrinking space for political dissent. In addition to these political concerns, a much more personal struggle is unfolding within the streets of the city. The very capital that built these luxury towers has also fueled a staggering rise in the cost of living, making Singapore one of the most expensive places to live on the entire planet. For the average citizen, the widening gap between the ultra-wealthy elite and the working class has turned the dream of homeownership into an increasingly distant reality. Furthermore, a quiet but persistent tension is growing over the nation's heavy reliance on foreign labor. As the government continues to import global talent to drive the economy, local workers often find themselves in a complex competition for jobs, creating a delicate social friction that is hard to ignore. But even more fundamental threats are looming over this low-lying island nation. An aging population is placing an unprecedented strain on the social system, while the existential threat of rising sea levels due to climate change challenges the very land they worked so hard to build. So now, amidst the growing calls for change from within, the mounting social burden, and a rapidly shifting global landscape, can Singapore truly sustain its historic formula for success? Then, the final question remains: what kind of future is this extraordinary island nation preparing for? For over half a century, Singapore was ruled by two towering figures, Lee Kuan Yew and his son, Lee Hsien Loong, who pursued elite-driven, top-down governance that prioritized efficiency above all else. While this father-son leadership transformed a resourceless island into a global power, it simultaneously created a social climate where individual voices were pushed aside or forced into silence under the weight of the state's grand economic goals. But now, that era of elite-driven rule is gradually fading, and a new wave of change is beginning under the leadership of Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. Having grown up in public housing with a humble background, he emphasizes much more flexible communication than before, focusing on healing domestic fractures and addressing the issues of distribution left behind by years of rapid growth. At the same time, Singapore is not slowing down its pursuit of innovation as it moves beyond being just a financial hub to secure its place in the next industrial frontier. By emerging as a center for AI, blockchain, and sustainable energy technologies, the nation is ensuring its survival strategy remains steps ahead of the global curve. In this way, Singapore is becoming a nation that proves how a country with absolutely no natural resources can stand at the peak of the world through sheer strategy and human talent alone. Therefore, the wealth of Singapore today is not merely a collection of accumulated money or a simple byproduct of growth. It shows us that the survival of a nation was never left to chance or luck, but was the result of a desperate will for survival and precise, cold calculation. So, the survival story of Singapore serves as a profound lesson for every city-state in the world. Yet it also remains a complex challenge that we must solve, a reminder of the social costs and difficult trade-offs required to build a better future.